5 of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, including Samuel Adams and John Hancock and Benjamin Franklin, were alumni, although Benjamin Franklin dropped out, alumni of this little public school in Boston. It was the first public school in Boston. It was the Boston Grammar School or the Boston Latin School, and it had opened on April 23rd of 1635 for the first time. Initially, it was held in the headmaster's home while they built a school, and it wasn't taxpayer funded for the first decade or so. It was funded from rentals of these little islands off of the coast of Boston, but quickly became one of the first taxpayer funded schools in the country. The white male students, if they had enough financial means in their own home, were able to bring their personal valets with them, which meant an enslaved person to follow them around at school all day. April 23rd of 1951 is also the day that Barbara Johns, a 11th grader in Prince Edward County, Virginia, creates her own school walkout. And she carefully organizes behind the scenes. She gathers an assembly when the principal has been kind of lured away from the school for the day, and 400 black students from a segregated high school all walk out at the same time that day. Becomes one of the cases that's involved in Brown versus the Board of Education and leads to desegregation of schools ultimately. Now, the school district there was one of these very, very clear cases that desegregation that segregation was never going to be equal, right? White students had beautiful school, freshly built. The black students literally had no cafeteria, they had no auditorium, they had no gymnasium, and the school had been built for 150 students, and it was still working at a capacity of 400 students. They were like these little kind of pressboard and tar paper classroom shacks built on the outside of the school with like individual little wood-burning potbelly stoves because they were just so over capacity. And Barbara Johns leads the walkout today, 1951. Barbara Johns, her family ultimately has to move to Washington, D.C. Her home is burned down. And while that happened in 1951, that walkout is not what created desegregation. And in fact, the Supreme Court ruled that there should be desegregation of the public schools. And Prince Edward County is an example of they literally shut down the public school system rather than create a desegregated school system. They shut down the public schools for 5 years in Prince Edward County. And so for 5 years, they decided that they would rather have no public education than desegregated public education. From 1959 until 1964, those schools remained empty. So 13 years later, after that walkout, they end up having a desegregated public education system. But this was not like, instantaneous.